It was supposed to be the happiest chapter of her life, but just hours after stepping into her new home as a bride, she was found dead, alone, cold, and without a single sign of struggle. Her husband? Gone without a trace. No forced entry, no broken locks, no calls for help. The apartment looked untouched, except for the lifeless body inside. This was shocking. Let me explain how everything pointed toward a betrayal hiding in plain sight. Where did the groom disappear to? Was this planned all along? And why were certain CCTV footages missing when the police checked? As investigators dug deeper, a dark truth surfaced. Secret phone records, suspicious financial transactions, and whispers of a hidden double life. Nothing about this case was simple. Every answer only raised more terrifying questions. Was this a perfect crime, staged by someone she trusted the most? Stay with me, because the real story is far more chilling than anyone first imagined. Sana was just 23 years old, bright, lively, full of dreams about her new life. Samir, 28, was known as a calm and successful young man. They met through mutual friends, and what started as a few casual conversations soon turned into a whirlwind romance. Their families were happy, and within months they were engaged. To celebrate their new beginning, Samir's family gifted them a luxury apartment in Mumbai, a symbol of a future full of comfort and love. But less than 10 days after the wedding, everything shattered. Sana was found dead inside that very apartment. Neighbors had heard strange sounds during the night, muffled shouting, something crashing to the floor. When no one answered the door the next morning, they called the police. What officers found inside wasn't just tragic, it was horrifying. Sana's body was lying inside, and Samir was nowhere to be found. No forced entry, no major signs of struggle, just one horrifying fact. Someone had stolen a young bride's future, right inside what was supposed to be her dream home. And the biggest question still hung heavy in the air: where was her husband? At first, Sana's life seemed perfect. Friends described her as glowing with happiness before the wedding, but as weeks passed, small cracks started to show. People close to her noticed something was not quite right. Samir, who once seemed charming, began showing signs of deep jealousy. He would call Sana repeatedly if she was out for even a little while. He often insisted she share her live location with him for safety, but friends felt it was more about control than care. Sana, being newly married and eager to make the relationship work, laughed it off. She would say things like, "He just loves me too much," but behind her smile there was a clear tension that not everyone missed. Samir's financial problems were another hidden storm brewing in the background. Although he presented himself as stable and well-off, he was under growing pressure. Business loans were piling up, and his family was discreetly covering some of his expenses, something Sana had no idea about. To the outside world, they were a young, successful couple living the dream. But inside their apartment, arguments were becoming more frequent. Close friends later revealed that Sana had started cancelling plans, rarely returned calls, and often gave vague excuses about being busy with family. One of the most worrying signs came on their wedding night itself. Friends who tried to reach her received missed calls that were never returned. WhatsApp messages were left on read without replies. Some even remembered hearing strange background noises, a sharp thud, a woman's raised voice during a late-night call. When they asked Sana about it later, she brushed it off, saying she was just tired and had dozed off. But the truth was, Sana had started to feel trapped. The Samir she married wasn't the Samir she was living with. He became quick to anger, suspicious of her every move, and obsessed with controlling who she talked to. Yet she kept hoping things would settle down. She told herself it was just the stress of a new marriage, a phase that would pass. Sadly, she would never get the chance to find out if it would. Looking back, the warning signs were there, flashing, bright and loud, But like so many young women eager to build a happy home, Sana tried to hold everything together, believing love could fix what fear was quietly breaking apart. The night Sana died, something strange happened that neighbors couldn't forget. Around midnight, a few people living in the same apartment building heard a loud, sudden thud from her flat. It wasn't the kind of sound you hear when something falls by mistake. It felt heavier, more alarming. But after that single noise, there was complete silence. No shouting, no cries for help, nothing. Some neighbors stayed awake for a while, thinking about knocking on their door, but when everything stayed quiet, they eventually went back to sleep, not realizing that something terrible had already happened behind those closed doors. When police arrived the next morning, called in by concerned neighbors who hadn't seen Sana or Samir since, the first thing they noticed was how untouched everything looked. The main door was locked from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no damage to the locks. It appeared at first glance like a peaceful home, but inside the bedroom, the reality was far from peaceful. Sana was found lying motionless, dressed in casual clothes. Not her bridal outfits, but clothes that suggested she was getting ready to rest for the night. What shocked investigators even more was that there were no obvious external injuries. No stab wounds, no gunshots, no bruises that screamed fight or attack. But when the body was taken for medical examination, doctors found suspicious internal injuries. There was minor internal bleeding and signs of possible pressure applied around the chest area. Experts believed these injuries couldn't happen naturally. Something had clearly gone wrong. There was no direct evidence yet, but the possibility of smothering or strangulation without leaving clear marks was considered. Adding to the mystery, several valuable items were missing. Jewelry gifted during the wedding, including a gold set Sana's parents had proudly given her, was gone. Their passports were also missing. But strangely, everything else in the house was untouched. Expensive electronics, cash lying in drawers, Samir's luxury watch, all left behind. If this was a robbery, why would a thief take only selected items and leave the rest? It didn't make sense. Police immediately started working on the theory that the missing items hinted at a planned escape. Maybe the crime wasn't random at all. Maybe it was calculated, and the missing husband wasn't missing because he was kidnapped or killed. Maybe he had simply run away, taking what he could carry to disappear without a trace. Investigators also began questioning why Samir's phone was switched off minutes after the neighbors heard the thud. His call record showed no outgoing calls after that moment. No attempt to call an ambulance, no calls to family or friends. It was as if he simply vanished into thin air, and that too without even trying to hide it carefully. The crime scene left more questions than answers. What happened inside that room? Why would a man, married less than 2 weeks, vanish after his wife's sudden death? Was this a panic reaction, or the final step in a plan that had been set in motion long before the wedding even took place? After Sana's tragic death, the biggest question left hanging was simple yet terrifying. Where was Samir? In the first few hours after the police found Sana's body, they launched a massive search operation. They checked hospitals, police stations, bus stops, but Samir was nowhere to be found. It wasn't just that he hadn't come home. It was that he had disappeared completely, without leaving behind even a hint of where he might have gone. Police tracked Samir's phone records and made a chilling discovery. His phone had remained active for a few hours after the time Sana is believed to have died. The last ping from his phone came around 3 a.m., showing he was near a busy train station in Mumbai. After that, the phone was switched off, and it never came back online. Investigators immediately suspected that he had boarded a train to escape. They checked CCTV footage from the train station, but couldn't find clear images. There were just too many people, and Samir didn't seem to stand out in the crowd. What made the situation even more suspicious was the sudden movement in Samir's bank accounts. In the 48 hours before Sana's death, Samir had withdrawn large amounts of cash from different ATMs across the city, small enough amounts to avoid immediate suspicion, but together it added up to a worrying sum. This wasn't the behavior of a man living his normal life. It looked like someone who was planning to leave everything behind. And then came the biggest breakthrough. CCTV footage from the apartment building's parking area showed Samir leaving, alone the night Sana died. He wasn't running or panicking. He was calm. He carried 2 large bags, looking just like a man leaving for a short trip. But now police knew better. He wasn't planning to return. When Sana's family was informed about this footage, their world shattered again. They had trusted Samir. They had believed he loved Sana. They couldn't believe that while they were still celebrating their daughter's wedding, her husband might have already been planning to escape. Samir's own family, however, gave a very different version. They insisted they knew nothing about his whereabouts. They even suggested that maybe Samir had been kidnapped too, by the same people who harmed Sana. But police didn't buy it. There was simply no evidence of a kidnapping. No ransom calls, no demands, no struggle marks, nothing. Meanwhile, the case caught public attention like wildfire. News outlets picked up the story, calling it one of the most disturbing cases in recent memory. Social media exploded with anger and heartbreak. Hashtags like "Chat Justice for Sana" and "Chat Find Samir" started trending. People demanded answers. How could a newlywed woman end up dead in her own home, and her husband just vanish into thin air? Why wasn't he caught already? Was someone helping him stay hidden? The police widened their search. They issued lookout notices at airports, railway stations, and bus terminals across the country. They checked hotel guest lists, sleeper buses, and train reservations. Samir's picture was circulated everywhere. But despite all these efforts, he remained missing. Every passing hour without an arrest increased the anger among the public. Many started questioning whether Samir's family's money and connections were helping him hide. Was there someone powerful protecting him? Or was he simply smarter than the police expected? Whatever the truth was, one thing was clear: finding Samir was no longer just about solving a murder case. It had become a race against time, to find a man who had turned a love story into a nightmare and then walked away like nothing had ever happened. As police dug deeper into Samir's life, the perfect image he had created started to fall apart piece by piece. In the beginning, he was described as a hard-working businessman, a good son, and a loving husband. But as investigators scratched the surface, a very different Samir began to appear, one who had been hiding more than anyone could have guessed. First came the shocking financial records. Samir was drowning in debt, credit cards maxed out, personal loans unpaid, and even friends he owed money to. Before marrying Sana, he had kept all of this hidden. To Sana's family, he seemed financially stable, but behind the scenes he was crumbling. Some police officers started wondering if marrying Sana, who came from a better-off family, was more about financial survival than love. Then came another bombshell. During a search of Samir's belongings left behind in the apartment, police found a second mobile phone, one that neither his family nor Sana knew existed. On this phone, there were dozens of calls and messages to a woman no one had heard of before. When investigators tracked her down, they found out she was Samir's secret girlfriend. Their relationship had started months before his wedding to Sana, and continued even after he got married. This discovery added a whole new layer to the case. It painted Samir not just as a runaway husband, but someone who may have had a motive strong enough to kill if he was in love with another woman and trapped in a marriage he didn't want. What else might he have been willing to do to free himself? Things got even darker when the toxicology reports came in. Early assumptions suggested that Sana had died from a sudden internal injury or cardiac arrest. But toxicology showed something much more chilling. Sana had been slowly poisoned over several days. The substance found in her blood wasn't strong enough to kill immediately. Instead, it built up over time, weakening her heart and damaging her organs until her body couldn't fight anymore. This raised terrifying questions. Had Samir been poisoning his wife even during their wedding celebrations? Was he smiling for family photos while secretly planning her death? The idea alone sent chills through everyone following the case. As investigators continued to piece things together, one more clue came from a surprising place. A casual acquaintance of Samir's. This person told police that a few weeks before Sana's death, Samir had offered him a large amount of money for a favor. At the time, the man said he thought Samir was joking or just talking big, but now it sounded far more serious. The details were vague, but the man remembered Samir mentioning he needed someone to handle a problem quietly. Although this statement wasn't enough for an arrest on its own, it painted an even clearer picture. Samir had been planning something dark for weeks, maybe even before the wedding happened. At this point, it was obvious Sana's death wasn't an accident, and Samir's disappearance wasn't a coincidence. It was a carefully laid-out plan. He had debts he couldn't pay, a relationship he wanted to keep, and a wife who stood between him and the life he truly wanted. The betrayal felt heavy, not just for Sana's grieving family, but for everyone who heard the story. A marriage meant to start a new chapter had instead been a cover for a deadly lie. Now, the pressure on the police was greater than ever. They needed to find Samir, and they needed to find him fast, before he could hurt anyone else or disappear forever into another city, another life. When the case finally reached court, Samir's defense team pulled a move that shocked almost everyone. They claimed that Sana's death wasn't murder at all. They said it was suicide. According to them, Sana had been suffering from depression, overwhelmed by the pressures of marriage and life changes. They hinted that maybe she had taken her own life in a moment of weakness, and Samir, devastated, had simply panicked and fled. On the surface, it sounded like a story that might create some doubt, but when investigators and Sana's loved ones heard it, they were furious, and they had strong reasons to be. Friends who had been close to Sana immediately pushed back against the defense's claim. They showed police and lawyers dozens of messages and call logs from Sana in the days before her death. The messages told a very different story. Sana was hopeful about her new marriage, excited about decorating their apartment, planning a future with Samir. In one text to her cousin, she wrote, "It feels like the beginning of everything good." That didn't sound like someone ready to end her life. The forensic evidence told an even harsher truth. Experts pointed out that the injury patterns on Sana's body were not consistent with suicide. There were subtle but crucial signs, small internal injuries, bruising in places that couldn't be explained by a simple fall or collapse. The toxicology results already suggested she had been poisoned slowly over several days. A suicide would have shown a sudden overdose or physical trauma, but Sana's body told a story of suffering that stretched over time, not an impulsive decision. Another key detail made Samir's defense look even weaker: the missing jewelry and passports. If Sana had truly taken her own life, why would her valuables be missing? Why would the scene be so suspiciously clean, as if someone had taken time to remove all evidence of their presence? Forensic specialists said it was extremely rare for a suicide scene to show such signs of tampering. Instead, it looked staged, carefully set up to confuse investigators. The final nail in the coffin came from the medical report's timeline. Based on body temperature, blood analysis, and other indicators, experts were able to conclude that Sana had likely died hours before Samir was last seen leaving the building. If she had died naturally or by her own hand, Samir should have immediately called for help. Instead, he had spent those hours doing something else, something that involved packing bags, wiping down surfaces, and making his quiet escape. At this point, the theory of suicide crumbled. What remained was a chilling truth. Sana's life had been taken from her not by her own hand, but by someone she had trusted the most, a man who had stood beside her just days before, promising to protect and love her forever. After the truth about Sana's death became clearer, authorities wasted no time. They issued an Interpol Red Corner notice against Samir, making him a wanted man across the world. It wasn't just a local manhunt anymore. It had become an international chase. News channels in India flashed his picture everywhere. Airports tightened their checks. His name was now flagged in immigration systems around the globe. But catching him was not going to be easy. Within days, tips started pouring in. Some said Samir was spotted in Dubai. Others said he had been seen in Malaysia. The Mumbai police set up special helplines, and every small lead was chased. Investigators started to notice a worrying pattern. Samir wasn't just running blindly. He was moving with careful planning, using safe houses, avoiding places with security cameras, and paying cash wherever he could. Then came the breakthrough, a fake passport trail. Officers found out that Samir had used a different name to book a flight out of India. His alias was Ravi Kumar, and under that name he had entered Dubai just 3 days after Sana's death. It was clear he had planned this escape well before the crime even happened. He had created false identities, hidden cash reserves, and contacts ready to help him vanish. Investigators didn't just focus on him, they also started looking closely at his family. Several relatives were questioned, and the findings were shocking. Phone records showed late-night calls between Samir and his cousin just hours before he fled. Money transfers were traced from his brother's bank account to Samir's fake identity handler. It became clear that his family wasn't just keeping quiet. They were actively helping him stay hidden. Some of them even risked criminal charges themselves for aiding and abetting a fugitive. Despite all of this, police pressure kept mounting. International cooperation between Mumbai police, Interpol and Dubai authorities tightened the net. Then, finally, came the news that made headlines across the country. In the last-ditch effort to flee from one safe house to another in Dubai, Samir got involved in a high-speed chase with local authorities. He raced through crowded city streets, trying desperately to lose his pursuers. But there was no escape. This time, Samir was caught, disheveled and exhausted, trying to slip into an underground tunnel network. Officers tackled him before he could vanish again. In his backpack, they found multiple fake IDs, large sums of cash, and a detailed map, with marked safe houses across several countries. It was clear, if he hadn't been caught that day, he would have disappeared for good. The arrest sent a shockwave through India. The man who had once been seen smiling next to Sana at their wedding, dressed like the perfect groom, was now a captured fugitive facing charges of murder, fraud, and international flight. Sana's family finally saw the first sign of justice they had been desperately waiting for. But the fight was not over yet. Now it was time to bring him home and make him answer for what he had done. The news of Samir's capture was a moment of relief, but it didn't bring back the one thing Sana's family could never get: their daughter. Sana's parents, once hopeful and excited for her new life, were now left with an empty house and broken hearts. In tear-filled interviews, they spoke about the daughter they had raised with love, and how she had been stolen away by the very man who promised to protect her. Their emotional pleas for justice touched the hearts of millions, and their pain became a symbol of the suffering faced by many women trapped in abusive relationships. The case sparked widespread conversations about marital abuse, with many women speaking out about their own experiences of being trapped in controlling relationships. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, took up the cause, organizing awareness campaigns and workshops to educate people on the early warning signs of abuse. They highlighted how women, like Sana, often remain silent in unhealthy marriages, afraid to speak out, afraid to break free. These organizations pushed for stronger support systems, both for victims and survivors. In Mumbai, local authorities began to take a hard look at how they could prevent tragedies like this one from happening again. There were serious discussions about implementing mandatory background checks for potential spouses, ensuring that the past of anyone entering a marriage was properly scrutinized. The city's leaders knew that nothing could undo the damage that had been done to Sana, but they vowed to make sure that no other woman would suffer in silence. Meanwhile, the public's grief over Sana's loss only grew. Candlelight marches were held in her memory. People gathered in Mumbai's streets, lighting candles and holding signs that read, "Justice for Sana." Street artists painted murals, capturing her image and her tragic story in bold strokes of color, making sure that her memory would never be forgotten. Her legacy was becoming a movement, a fight for women's rights, for justice, and for the safety of those who couldn't always protect themselves. Sana's death was a tragedy that shocked a nation, but in her memory, the call for change had been heard. The fight for justice didn't end with Samir's arrest. It had only just begun. Sana's legacy lived on in every candle lit, in every march, and in every woman who found the strength to speak out against abuse. Sana trusted love. Instead, she met betrayal. Her story is a heartbreaking reminder of how easily darkness can hide behind a smile. Samir promised to cherish her, but instead, he trapped her in a world of lies and control. Sana never stood a chance. The betrayal she faced was not just from her husband, but from the very system that failed to protect her. As we remember Sana, we need to ask ourselves, how many others are out there, suffering in silence, unable to speak out against the violence they face? Her story is not just hers, it could be anyone's. And that's why we cannot let it be forgotten. Call to action. If Sana's story moved you, don't stay silent. Share it. Speak out against hidden violence. For every Sana whose voice was stolen, your voice can make sure she's not forgotten. Let her legacy live on in the change we create. Stand up, speak out, and be the voice that others need.